The first item on the agenda is the evacuation procedure. Those who don't know it, we are not anticipating having any form of fire or alarm test this evening. Hear the alarm is therefore likely to be a real event. So please leave the council house by the nearest safest exit, which is likely to be that door, and go to Assembly Point G and the car park, which is just outside the. Please stay there until Mr. Tobin says it is safe to do otherwise. Don't just go home or come back into the building, because that could impel firemen who will have to come into a potentially burning building to find you. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence and members are away on official council business. I think we need to add Councillor Hancock. Members, are you all happy to know? Yes. Yes. Welcome to Councillor Mrs. Clues and Councillor Mrs. Humphreys. I'm sure neither of you are strangers to the planning board, but that's right. Do we have any disposable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? Councillor's Clues. Thank you.
Could I disclose a non-interest in paper 2022? Wasn't part of any discussion statement.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Members, the next item is the minutes of the meeting of the board held on the 1st of August. Are you all happy that I sign it as a true and thank you. Members, you will have noticed, I'm sure, that we have members of the public joining us in the public gallery. I'm sure they have nothing better to do than listen to everything that we've got to say this evening, but I think it would be courteous at least if you brought the two items that I believe members of the public are here to listen to forward on the agenda. So if, with your consent, we will deal with item 5F, 89 to 91 Main Street, Austria first, and item 5G, Britannia Works, Colter Road, Alveston second, then go back to the rest of the agenda. Are you all happy with that? Thank you much. We shuffle his back, bringing the items forward. But the first item that we'll deal with is application number 687 for 89 to 91 Main Road, Austria. We have two speakers. The first of whom is Teresa Haynes, who is the Ms. Haynes, if you take the speaker's chair, and Mr. Brown introduces his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members are aware we'll be seeking the introduction of the report, and it's the third time the item has been signed. The first time it was deferred to enable some discussion to take place with the applicant to see if there could be a reduced use of the swimming pool. And then the second deferral was to enable a site meeting, member site visit the site, also to have a meeting with the applicant. You'll see, Mr. Chairman and members, that the report includes items B and C, which in fact are the note of the site visit and the note of the meeting. Appendix A is the previous report, which shows the reductions in use that were agreed by the applicant earlier on. Following the site visit and the meeting, as you can see from the notes of the meeting, a site visit took place between the applicant and the highway officers, and that has resulted in a major change in circumstance. As you'll see from the report, Mr. Chairman, that means that the Highway Authority has no longer got an objection, provided that the use is limited to that outlined in the schedule, in other words, the hours which are outlined on the report. I've included a copy of the Highway Authority's revised response within the report for you, and there is also a plan there showing the visibility display, which is the basis of the Highway Authority's change of view. Now, so, Mr. Chairman, that is a major change in circumstance, because the major issue that the planning board was looking at was the highway safety issues on the previous two occasions. So therefore, Mr. Chairman, my recommendation therefore has changed, as you will see from the report, as a result of that changed stance by the County Council. I'm now recommending approval subject to conditions, and there may need to be additional conditions added onto that depending on what resolution is made tonight. I would just point out from a professional point of view, Mr. Chairman, that if this is to be refused, or if members wish to, the board wishes to refuse it on technical grounds, technical highway grounds, there will have to be robust technical evidence in order for that to happen. In other words, to defend a refusal if there is an appeal. I'll leave it open to the members then, Mr. Chairman, and open to you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Haynes, welcome back to the Council Lounge. As I'm sure you will recall from previous meetings, Mr. Tobin will remind you of the rules of engagement for the group. Mr. Tobin. Sorry, I called the wrong person to speak first. Are you okay to carry on, or would you like to go on?
I'm going to go around.
Okay.
Thank you.
In that case, my apologies. Never have we? I should order you to speak first. Yes, please. As you may be aware, there's a 3-minute time period allocated for speakers for and speakers against. Have you decided how you wish to split that between yourselves? Yeah. Okay, so we'll have one of you and the other one will carry on. Correct. So, Mr. Tobin. So, usual processes are then remind you. Yeah. That would be the normal process. Are you happy to change the appointments convenience, or would you like? As long as you're happy, you know where we're heading. So, again, just 3 minutes, and maybe, so you're 3 minutes.
The original report is the common rules. You reduce the report, it's 154 common. This is plus cars from new bungalow to also any support staff. Our concern is, how do you propose these that how do you know that they're only going to stick that reduced amount? The applicant has already been blatant regarding, so why would we assume that they're not? I think any application needs to be based on full 272 columns. Allow a development along a one-track lane, no passing places, that amount of cost. So we would like you to really consider why you're going to allow it. I also note that the highways report makes no mention of visibility displays, cars that have to reverse them, assuming that all the cars are going to go out onto the road facing forwards. The fact that it's single track with that amount of traffic means that it's inevitable some cars are going to have to reverse out onto main. I think this actually is a highways issue need to be considered very seriously and is dangerous.
When I spoke last time, I said that due to all the traffic movements in the class lane, accident rate. Well, lo and behold, we've had an accident. 2 vehicles have been written off. Somebody suffered personal injury and had to be carted off to hospital. And when the police attended, they said, when the police attended, they said it was due to a dangerous junction and due to poor visibility. This is the junction where, if this proposal goes ahead, we're going to get minimum an extra 180 car movements per week. I think that's dangerous. I think any right-minded person would think that. That's why this planning should be refused. Since the accident, my wife and I have suffered a lack of confidence going in and out of our own house. I'd say that with all the car movements generally, our residential amenities suffered greatly. I'm sure that you would find if you had an extra nearly 200 car movements going by your kitchen window, you would feel the same way. I do feel the council's not given enough consideration to this point, but I'm hoping that you people here tonight will do so. Please review this planning application.
Thank you both very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions for our speakers?
I've a question for the resident. Mentioned briefly there, in a short period of time, about amenity. Can you understand if we more amenity?
Like I said, I think anybody who has an extra 200 car vehicle, literally, a week, moving in front of their door where they're going in and out of their house, only feet away, would feel the same way. Not only that, we've had an increase in noise. Previous to this, when we used to sit in our garden, it was a haven of tranquility and peace. Now all we can hear car noises up and down the lane and at the back of the garden. We've had increased car fumes, if you like, that we're not used to. Our garage, we don't feel as though we have the same sort of confidence to be able to go in and out of our garage the way we used to, because the garage faces onto Flats Lane. We've noticed as well that when cars are queuing to go out of Flats, often there can be a queue of 4 or 5 cars, but we've lost a deal of privacy as well. People tend to look in through the kitchen window. So it's affected not only our tranquility, it's affected our privacy, we've got increased pollution, we've got increased noise. We've lived in that house for 28 years now. 28 years we have maintained Flats Lane. We've demossed it, we've weeded it, we've swept it, we've repaired it, and in fact we've looked after it for 28 years. What happens now with all these increased traffic? Potholes, there's going to be deterioration. Are we expected to maintain it like we had? Somebody else share the cost. All these things have affected us in a big way.
Thank you.
Members, do you have any other questions? In which case, thank you both very much. Members, our next speaker is now Teresa Haynes. If you take the chair. Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Whether you've attended before, and obviously just seen the record of inconvenience and just to address the board.
First of all, thank you. I just want to comment briefly. I wasn't on the mention of the accident. The accident, as far as I'm aware, we were 24 hours. Swimming lesson in time, full period of time, and day only. There were no swimming lessons. The only two together on 54 hours. Also during that period on 24 hours,
family on holiday, so the lane isn't in use. I'm not really sure if that has any relevance.
I'm sorry, we cannot have a discussion, I'm sorry. We have to hear the speaker.
Unless we start on the fifth.
And- Sorry, if we cannot have order, I will have to clear the public gallery. So please, will you stop talking so we can hear the speaker?
Sorry,
Look, I'm sorry, I'm going to clear the public gallery if this doesn't stop. Please come in.
Monday, we do today, and we get them a little vehicle we can just say. What I came to speak to you about was basically, I want to thank everyone. I realise this process has gone on a little bit. We made it very clear from the very beginning that we needed help and guidance to try and get these communities working in a way that was safe, positive, and fun local facility that we could provide for our local. Again, I get that not everybody's going to love what we're doing, but we're trying to do it right. We have been guided by you. We've held meetings, board meetings, site visits. We've had the highways really engaged with us, and we are trying to do everything right, and we really appreciate that you're guiding through that. And hopefully, based upon the recommendations and the fact that we have followed and met all those requirements now, we just want to make it very clear as well that going forward, we realise those conditions are important. We've always said we want to ensure that lane is maintained better, obviously, until we've been given permission. We won't do that. So we did some car parking, which was best American. So we know also that the movements and the limitations that we set out are important on the amount of cars, the days and the time, we're trying to make that work. Again, we do appreciate that it's more than everyone's going to. But we're trying to follow those recommendations. We said that we likely have to approve you. But we just wanted to thank people for their guidance and trying to understand.
Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? No, in which case, thank you very much. Members who'd like to start the debate? So,
I'd like to say first of all that I use that until recently when I lost my dog. I actually use that lane every single day, and it's been a rural lane, overgrown in some places. Some people who only ever walk down the odd horse, etc. I have a concern because when the planning permission was granted for that, many years ago, that was the planning permission was given for use of a swimming pool, use for the family on that side, building. And to try and do this now, it was changing what the original concept was. And I would have thought that if they'd have applied for planning permission from the very beginning and asked that we're going to have this business working 6 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is, all through the school term times, it's never been given permission. Now, I'm not going to harp on about the safety issue, but that is a dangerous colony. And after this chair, I would like you to go back to the county. It's not the only time the county had to change their minds when it first comes forward, and things have changed, and nothing really has changed to make it, as far as I can see physically. And I'd like to find out how county do. But the residents right. There's a garage. I mean, I'm not going to show you all these photographs, but the garage. There's a garage where the cars come in and out. It cuts the lane. A number of planning permissions that I've seen over the last 15 years, I've never seen a property or business be able to have a drive in and out of the building without having a passing place, so that vehicles get off the road and cannot block each other off. And we'll get back to the amenity now. I met the resident yesterday for the first time, and I was there for a little while. In the time I was there, 7 vehicles actually went past that front window. And the nature of it is, people can't help themselves. They're going to look to the left and the right, and if you're sat in your sitting room, you will get seen. It has changed the amenity for those people that have been there for 28 years. And as a result of it, I think the residents, that amenity got to be there for the people that are there now and the people that come in the future.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Brown, I have a couple of questions.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor.
I think it's great. Notwithstanding the climate of the thing,
Mr. Brown, I have a couple of questions for you, please. In the our first speaker talked about how we could become comfortable, I think, with the number of vehicles using the access. How can we address that? How, if consent were to be granted, how do we prevent an additional problem?
the Highway Authority's revised comments relate to the reduced use of the swimming pool as set out in the report. So therefore, the Highway Authority is comfortable with that level of use. It's open to the review of some of the comments that we made tonight. It's open to the board to go back to the County Council and the applicant to see, in fact, if a further reduction could be made. The County Council, I suspect, would say yes. They would agree to a further reduction because they've agreed this is the maximum level that's acceptable. You would have to go back to the County Council and the applicant, particularly the applicant, to see if they were prepared to reduce it even further. However, obviously the applicant is aware of what the County Council has said in relation to this number, and therefore the applicant may not be prepared to reduce it. But effectively, this any reduction is in the applicant's gift, not in the County Council's gift.
Honestly, Mr. Brown, that's almost an answer to a different question. How can the board become comfortable that information we have in your previous board report, where we talk about the number of vehicles, how can we have comfort that that is what?
It'll be due through planning conditions, Mr. Chairman. As you can see here, the recommended conditions include the schedule, which is outlined in the report on page whatever it is, and that will be put into the notice of planning conditions granted, and there's a question then on enforcing that planning condition. We will respond to queries about the number of vehicles, and if necessary, we may have to undertake monitoring of the particular use of the access in order to ensure compliance with the condition.
Could you just direct me to the condition, Mr. Brown, which specifies the number of vehicles?
It's condition 2, Mr. Chairman. The swimming pool hereby approved shall only be used for purposes incidental to, etc., 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 as set out in the schedule attached to this notice, and then the schedule is below.
And where in the schedule, Mr. Brown, does it specify a number of vehicles?
It doesn't specify a number of vehicles, and it specifies the lessons, as indicated there, and that the number of vehicles which members will be talking about relies on the number of people turning up for the lessons.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Councillor Bowen, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Oops, I hope that's right. Actually, you've sort of asked my question. The question was, how is it going to be monitored? And then I've got another question, having listened to Mr. Brown, which is, I thought that Highways had given a number or was making their judgment on a number, and that cannot only relate to the number of people having swimming lessons, because you don't know, that doesn't necessarily have the right number of vehicles. So I think if we're going to rely on Highways guidance, and they are relying on a number has to be there, and then we have to be assured that it'll be monitored.
Mr. Brown, I have a second question for you. Occasionally, the board does grant consent for additional housing along a narrow lane or track, if you like, almost back down development. When we're looking at that, it is usual for us to consider how many vehicles will be driving past someone's house. What is the normal rule of thumb for how many vehicles we consider it to be reasonable?
Well, in terms of traffic projection from a house, obviously, what the highway authority would normally say 6 to 7 movements a day from a normal house. So therefore, in fact, in this particular occasion, the bungalow, which has been referred to, would generate in the highway authority's view 6 to 7 movements a day, and they would pass the objector's house, as you said there. The number of movements that which is now projected, with a figure of something like 150 or getting on for 160, that is far more than just the bungalow. It's materially more than just the bungalow.
Thank you. Members, sorry, Councillor, Mrs.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's got to go back to the immunities again and the way it's actually affecting the people in Bungalow, the mental stress that it's having, that they can't even think, I'm going out to the garage to get something out, because they can't get into the garage and open the door because cars have come past. I don't think any of us would put up with that. I know I wouldn't in my own house, to have to think that I've got to go outside and actually think about when I've got to do something. And if somebody's parked outside my window and looking through my window, I wouldn't put up with that either. And just the intrusion of what's going on in these people's houses at the moment is something that I don't think anybody should have to put up with. When it's a country house, it's down private lane, and all of a sudden they've got people parked outside their houses looking into their house. The intrusion and the upset it's causing on this family, it shouldn't have to be put up with. It shouldn't be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, you will all be aware that we've had at least one site visit. I think there's at least one, maybe two. I attended on one site visit when, to be fair, the bulk of the consideration at that time was about highway safety, because we were looking at what the highway authority said. However, the members who were there with me were also concerned about the impact on the existing neighbour's property and the proximity of what will become a busier access way based upon the additional use. I think Mr. Brown has sort of explained to you that ordinarily, well, to my question, where we have a house driving, an application for a house driving past someone's door or garage, we normally have a reasonable limit to what is an acceptable amount of usage. I cannot, based on what I've heard, believe that we should treat this application any differently to if this were looking at a new use at the back. And in my view, personally, the level of additional traffic will have a significant and adverse impact on the amenities that property, those residents, would normally be expected to encounter. Members, it is highly unusual for me as chairman to propose a motion, and I don't do it easily, because I think it is largely for the board to make its mind up. This is not a direction, it is me as a member of the board making a recommendation. But I would like to propose that planning consent is refused on the basis of the impact on neighbour community. Is there a second? Thank you. Are there any other proposals? So we have the proposal for refusal. Mr. Brown, do you need any additional information?
You referred to impact on neighbour amenity, Mr. Chairman. I'm assuming you're going to take the evidence from the objector as the content or the evidence for that particular basis. And if you are, then in putting it into a planning context, the relevant local planning policy would be LP 29, development considerations, there's a clause in there which refers to residential amenity. It's the one we normally use in instances like this.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm happy with LP 29. I have to say I'm basing it on what I saw personally and what the local members have spoken about as well as the objective. Mr. Tobin, do you need anything?
It's a matter for you to determine whether that affects community outweighs everything else in the project.
Thank you. Members, we have a proposal for refusal of planning consent, which has been proposed and seconded. No other proposals. Can I see those in favour of refusing consent? Can I see anyone against? That's unanimous, and consent is refused. I'm sorry, I can't let you comment on. Earlier on, someone wished to speak, and I wouldn't let him speak either. In fairness, I can't let anybody do it. I'm sorry. Members, I think if we can give those members of the public who wish to leave the opportunity to do so.
Mr. Chairman, there was refusal there. Clearly, the board will have to consider the expediency of enforcement action, because the use obviously is existing. I'll just point that out to you now. We may want a further report on that, because there's nothing obviously in my report relating to that. You will have to consider that issue, because, as I said, the use is actually underway at the present time, and the board has just refused planning permission. So therefore, the actual use is now unauthorised. You will have to consider the expediency of enforcement action.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Yes, I think it would be appropriate to do that, but the board does not have the requisite information in front of it to enable a detailed consideration. So if you could bring a report to the next meeting, then we can consider it. So, members of the public, if you'd like to stay, you're more than welcome to. If there's any of you who wish to go, you are very welcome to go and have some chips or something. I've just been made aware that car registration number HB56E05 has left their lights on.
As soon as he started saying it, HP is like, oh, there you go.
We'll wait till you come back.
I've got some jump leads, it's the worst one.
I've got jump links, but it happens a lot.
We did last night.
I was going to say it's a shame she wasn't here last night.
Yeah, these were a different one, right?
What are we doing now, G?
We'll just give Councillor Gosling 2 minutes to turn the lights on. Oh,
Yeah. G.
yes.
It's just moved to Coulsdale Road and stuff. Yeah, it has been stuck all the time on the early one.
We can't get page.
You got to walk there, so that's the presentation.
That's the thing, but you come up with it. Press that one. Yeah, that's right. I suppose that.
It
So, members, I think we're all back. So we'll resume. We now move on to consideration of application 401, 402 for Britannia Works, Coleshill Road, Atherton. We have two speakers, the first of which is Mr. Alan Wyman. Mr. Wyman, if you could take the speaker's chair while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got working on the back screen. If we look in the gallery, you can come round to the front to see some work. The plans I've got are the ones that are actually in the agenda papers. The principle for members will be aware of this particular site. The principle of complete demolition and redevelopment of the site by 70-room care home has already been agreed through two consents, one in 2019 and one in 2020. This particular application is now looking at some variations of those two and effectively combining those two consents into one final set of plans. As you'll see from the report, Mr. Chairman, that reconsideration or review is very much largely led by the internal arrangements that will be proposed for the new building, and the reasons for that are outlined in the report. The differences between the two schemes are outlined in the report, and the plans that I'm going to show on the screen effectively show these, but they are replications of those that you have on your paper copies. The first plan there is the approved scheme, which you can see is the development hard up against the canal frontage with the access onto Richmond Road. The revised layout, as you can see, retains the access onto Richmond Road, but the actual built development is pulled back a little way from the Coventry Canal, and you can see there as outlined in green, or coloured green on that particular plan. It's basically it's a little bit thinner building, I think is the way to actually describe it. Then in terms of the elevations, clearly the elevation to Coleshill Road is perhaps the most important one, and that's the one that members have mainly been concerned with. The existing elevations on the top there, as you can see, and I'm just going to skip a couple of slides. If you can remember that top elevation, which is existing, the top elevation on this one, that is now what is proposed. And basically the changes, if I now go back to the original, basically the changes are the windows here are slightly dropped in level, as you've seen. The arrangement here has changed, that's actually becomes a solid development, and the entrances on the front have also been rationalised, as you can see here on that one. If I then move on to, as now proposed, you can see the same areas. The windows have been reduced slightly in depth. This is now being filled in, and the access arrangements at the front have been rationalised, but they still retain the arched approach, as you can see there. If I go back then to the canal elevation, which is the top elevation there, and you can see there very much the four-storey industrial type of design approach that was approved in 2019. Locked again on this. If we go through now to top elevation there, which is the fresh new proposed elevation for the canal, you can see there's still a four-storey element here, reducing to 3 stories in the middle, and then the 3 stories at the end. The coastal road is at this end, so the right-hand side, and the site extends around the canal here to the left. But you can see that there's far more of a residential feel to the design approach on the left-hand side there, as opposed to the existing elevation, or indeed the approved elevation for that particular canal. And that's referred to in the report as one of the enhancements which I consider leads to the recommendation of approval. As I was saying, Mr. Chairman, the report basically says that we've got a permission here in principle in 2019, 2020. The current variations combine them and add some alterations as well, and those alterations are considered to be an improvement over both of what we've approved in 2019, and therefore the recommendation is for approval. By combining them, combining the 2 consents, it means that some of the conditions which were on the 2019 and 2020 consents are effectively redundant, and therefore they can be combined together into a fresh permission, which is effectively what is the full recommendation in front of you, Mr. Chairman, with some of the conditions removed and some of the conditions altered in order to bring matters right up to date. But the key thing here, Mr. Chairman, is that planning permission has already been granted for the complete demolition and replacement of this site with a 70-bed care home, and this is a further variation of the design approach to achieve that particular outcome. The car parking remains the same, the access remains the same. It is the design approach which is different. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Martin, welcome to the council house. As you may have guessed, Mr. Tobin will now explain the rules of engagement on public speaking. Please go ahead.
Sure, you saw what happened earlier. You were given 3 minutes in which to address the board, so I'll tell you when the 3 minutes starts. I don't think whether you have 1 minute remaining, and then I'll tell you if you're speaking at the end of that period that your time is up. So your time starts now.
I have no objection to building and its use or anything like that. In fact, the quicker it happens, the better for the town. Probably should have to the horse's bolted, but my objection is the parking facility. 20 bays for residents and visitors, and 4 blue bag bays, 24 in total. With 35 1-bedroom flats and 35 2-bedroom flats, that's 105 bedrooms. A single occupancy, okay, but people will have spouses, care workers, people living in relatives. Those 2-bedroom apartments aren't just going to have the one-person unit. There's 1 bay for ambulance and minibus and a temporary parking lot. The stamped car park is for 3 bays. There's for a care and assisted living. I would imagine there's going to be a lot more than 3 people working and on a shift basis with only 3 cars. How that operates with a shift change. Somebody's going to come and move cars, all the stuff can get in there. It isn't just supposed to be any provision for extra charging of vehicles. So it's I think that the residents of the apartment, so we have living spaces, carers, and more also daily help from outside, care workers, nurses, doctors, cleaners, visitors, grocery shopping, deliveries, and all the other needs for vehicle space. We'll have the parking space, which is inevitable, but the parking will overspill into the surrounding roads, thus occupying spaces used by residents and businesses in those roads. Emergency service vehicles are inadequate and limited access to the purpose of the building. The entrance and access for any emergency vehicle it would be difficult for them to turn around and exit the side. It could be wouldn't aim to put the person who's probably in an ambulance around. The shape of the car park, it makes it very difficult for maneuverability.
why he's a very good guy, but in a authority manual, they're going to get into those gaps for those spaces very easily. And again, with things like people living there, if they've got Sainsbury's or Tesco delivery vehicles, those vehicles aren't going to move around the line. And now it causes congestion.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Members, we now have two gentlemen, Mr. Alistair Sheehan and Mr. Dan Gray. Just Alistair. Would you take the speaker's chair? Mr. Sheehan, welcome to the Council House. I'm sure you will be completely surprised to hear that Mr. Tobin will now explain the rules for speaking. Mr. Tobin.
As you several times now, the agreements to when time starts, when you have 1 minute remaining, and then you can still speak again when your time is in. 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors. Yeah, my name is Alistair Sheehan. I'm Development Director at a company that's applying for delivery of what is actually an extra care scheme rather than care homes. That means that each person will have their own apartment. 62 one bed. 62 bedrooms. So they do look, it does look as if there are more bedrooms because they are bigger apartments. And that's been done intentionally in line with discussions with the County Council's commissioning team and very much with regards to discussions with your own exec officers, the head of housing and the colleagues, in order to maximise the amenity. The viability of this site has been questionable for quite some time, and what we have been able to do is to maintain quality rather than quantity by enhancing the size of each of those apartments by virtue of the fact that we have a new build scheme rather than refurbishment of the existing building. I note the objectors' comments on parking. We have checked with commissioners within the county, and the parking standards are broadly in line with other extra care schemes. The idea is to avoid a sea of car park, and the actual shape of the car park hasn't changed from the original application. And I'm pleased to say that there will be electric vehicle parking because as soon as we have dealt with the financial elements with the executive council on a new model, a new financial model we're doing together, we will be providing green technology, which will be solar, ground source heat pumps, and battery technology, which will have the impact of saving over £200 per apartment per month in heating and electricity bills, which will promote eating and heating. Plus, we will be installing an electric vehicle, which will be charged at a much more beneficial rate than they would normally. So I'd just like to thank exec officers and members for that support and today.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? I have a couple, if you don't mind. The first one is, you referred earlier that Mr. Wyman mentioned the issue of car parking, and I've no doubt you would have been through the process and calculated how many, but are you confident and comfortable that the number is adequate, and would you be content to include electric vehicle charging, perhaps for staff or for residents, and maybe a bicycle store to encourage particularly staff who are local to get to work in a more environmentally friendly way?
Absolutely. We are fully intending to provide electric vehicle charging. We are comfortable with the amount of car park because of the well, unfortunately, the average age of residents tends to be slightly higher than we would hope. And what we find is that most the reason we chose this location, one, is because of sustainable credentials. And so we find that quite a few of the residents will not bother with a car or they will share. But the accessibility to public transport combines to give us more than enough car. And the shift nature of any work with staff means that it's a gradual ebb and flow of cars coming in and out of the car park. The other element is that we have tested the turning circuits, obviously, for emergency vehicles with full sweat to ensure that it conforms with highways requirements. But we certainly will be prepared to put the electric vehicle charging in, and the whole point of that is to enhance the overall best line possible for residents. We have looked at a number of challenges to residents on council tax credits, and we foresaw what was going to happen with the cost of living crisis that was starting during this year. And with the slowdown in delivery of the housing association, the 40% build cost increases, we've had to look at a fundamental, we've had to make fundamental changes to a model to address all those issues in advance. So when it comes to the car parking, we're very comfortable on the numbers, comfortable on the layout and so on highways, and very happy to provide electric vehicle charging for the staff, which will all come through because the green technology will be paying for it.
Thank you. Can I just check, Mr. Chairman, do you represent the company that owns the property at the moment, or are you about to apply?
Yes, we represent with a joint venture between the firms.
I don't think local members will forgive me. I didn't point out that this building has been in a parlour state for a little while, I would say. And there are significant local concerns over safety, and particularly the aspect that it presents to people who visit town and who live there. If we are, well, I suspect we are, but let's go through the process. We're going to give consent tonight. Could you give members any guidance as to when you would expect
more meetings to have with the district council with regards to the nature of the development, creating an asset for the community and the council. And our aspirations were to have done those by now. It will be done and dusted by January. We were hoping it was going to be beginning of summer. And so, with a gear up, I would have thought that it would be mid to late March when we get on site. However, we'll look to try and demolish and make it as soon as possible because we're very, very keen to get this
and that's 2023.
Oh, yeah.
But I am absolutely delighted to hear what you say about demolition and making safe. The sooner you can start with that, I think the members will be very content. I saw Councillor Derwicks first, and then Councillor John.
Thank you. the plan here, I know it's only an initial outline. We have a bin store on the side, and it is not very big. One of the problems with elsewhere in the world is that we have bin stores with flats closer to the pit, and the bin store is nowhere near big enough for problems with collection and problems with overflowing rubbish, etc. Can you assure that facility is big enough? Because in so many instances, it isn't, and then we have problems later on with the collection.
Absolutely, we can certainly review that, and just to echo your frustrations on the time this has taken. This has taken my business partner and an enormous amount of money to try and get to this stage. I personally was looking at this 2.5 years. We have looked at every different type of financing and model to try and make the viability of this stack, and we finally found a way of doing it and being able to incorporate all the assistive technology and the green technology. It's taken the combined brain power of most of our colleagues sat there twiddling our thumbs, building code to work out how on earth we were going to do it, and we now have the way forward. So yes, on the bins, we can certainly review. They are in line with what we usually expect. However, it's worth
You've got 62 flats there, and you've got bins with 3 houses.
well, there was normally the euro.
It does need,
Yes.
we
We will.
appreciate the amount. And 1991, I think, something like that. Councillor and very good construction earlier on as well, so I do appreciate the wording that we put down to start. And then we got over.
Oh, well, yes, and then over the past 2 years, build costs have gone up by just under 40%, which has been crucifying, and you'll find out, you'll notice that a number of contractors are going up as we speak over the fixed price contracting. And so, in some ways, it was probably a good idea that we started, but not in terms of the time scales and the immediate.
I was going to point out that Councillor Oates had an awful lot more hair in those days. And from his chin, well,
as well. I remain concerned about the parking as well.
Thank you.
And anything like that.
Councillor John.
Thank you, Chair. First, to commend the design. I think the design is superb. It will satisfy a need, and it will satisfy a growing need. I think one of the immediate things, and I've raised this several times over the years, is the safety of the public walking by at the moment. That people at the top end of Coleshill Road will not walk down that side of the road in the fear of getting after it, to put it bluntly. And I've been up there with binoculars and looking at it. And some years ago, part of the roof was removed, and I spoke to Mr. Brown, and this must go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, that part of the roof was removed by a big roller door because it was unsafe. Now it's had 5, 6, 7 more years of winters in there now, and it's even further unsafe. My biggest concern is in supporting the residents in there. And there's one of our councillors, and I won't say who it was, but when we went on the site, said, I ain't parking there, I ain't getting a grip for the street. There needs to be something that is done immediate and visible that the residents up there really do get to comfort from. That it's going to be safe. And yeah, I agree with your costs and all that. It has gone ridiculous. But at the end of the day, public safety must be top of the list. And so if you look down there now, there are loose wires hanging,
before we move it and make it safe. And I will ask Mr. Toby if anything followed up with the building.
We're in the middle of questions to our speaker.
Yes, I know, but
Do you have a question for the speaker?
I was going to do anything about it.
Yes, we will. We will send some guys around to try and make safe anything that we see as dangerous, and we are equally concerned to get on with this. We've been pushing also to try and get to the stage where we will be able to software is uphold those, but we will send guys to review anything which could be seen as a risk. Of course,
There's a forest growing out in the way which can't be very conducive to good bricks.
no, absolutely. So we will have people out next week to inspect and to make sure anything which we consider as to be dangerous. And then if you do see anything else which gives you any cause for concern, then please do get in touch with us, and we'll get guys to know you.
Thank you for your comments.
That's the problem. I mean,
And support.
the whole idea of this is to give an asset to the community. What's the problem with the community? To enable people to live with what they know, but then in big
When can we go and look for it?
Yeah, well, I've just gone through the age of 50 and I think I'll be going on that soon.
Now, be careful where you go. There's a lot of people over and under 50 here. Any other questions for our speaker? In which case, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Members, who'd like to start the debate? Any comments, questions? Councillor
I
George?
think having read it and looked at it in simple terms, just bringing the application in with reality. And I would like to propose that it's supported.
Thank you. So, second. Thank you very much.
It would be nice if the gentleman just spoke there was to reassure the gentleman at the back of that car park. I talk to them and reassure them, and make them reassured for their purpose.
And Mr. Brown, do we have any, is there a need to amend the conditions in line with this conversation we've had, or will you simply follow that up with the applicant?
I can follow up with the applicant, Mr. Chairman. I just, whilst you were speaking, I looked through, there's no condition to do with the charging points, we're particularly for the review of the Ben store, but I can deal with that in conjunction with the applicant if you're agreeable to me for me to do that.
Yes, please. And you're happy to have a chat with me?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So members, that's been proposed and seconded for approval. Can I see those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, sorry, one technical question on this. Given the, if you like, I'm slightly confused. This was an application for an amendment. But given the nature of the two consents, is this now effectively a new consent with a further 2 years to go in terms of...
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. And this is, the application has been submitted under section 73, and which is a variation. And in those circumstances, we have to issue a fresh permission, which is why we had a combination of 2019 and 2018 conditions, and why I said they were redundant, so that this will be a fresh permission, and therefore it starts the time period again.
Thank you. And Mr. Brown, I'm sure if you tell it was a section 73, all members would have instantly known. Thank you, members. As before, you're more than welcome to leave. So now, members, we move right the way back to the beginning of the agenda to A452 and the east of the HS2 section.
I'll get there, Mr. Chairman. Just members in the room now, so look at the screen. The site is outlined in red here. This is the 452, which goes down to the Stoneleads roundabout down here. The site of the new station is effectively in here, and the A45 is quite some way to the south. The old railway line as you can see here. The quarry, which is referred to, are those two signs, two pits. This is with the HS2 station imposed, and members will have seen that in the media recently on the start of work on the station here, with the access onto the 452, as you can see here. The roundabout, which is referred to in the report, is this fellow here. The two multi-stories are on this side between the A452 and the HS2 line. I'm afraid I can't improve the design of that, Mr. Chairman. It is what it is, and as you can see from the report, a couple of those stories would be actually in the quarry, but still, nevertheless, it's still going to be very high. In terms of the report, Mr. Chairman, we've said that the multi-stories here will replace existing surface car parking. That surface car parking is here, together with double that area on the other side of the station, on the left-hand side here. It's not shown on that plan. But basically, approval has already been granted for 7,500 car parking spaces, surface car parking spaces, and that is to be replicated now in these two multi-story buildings, as you can see here. The report goes into the policy background, the Arden Cross proposals, which are outlined in the full technical appraisal, which I've attached to the report. So, from a strategic point of view, with the Solihull plan now going through examination in public, no modifications to be made to the actual Arden Cross proposals. It is highly likely that the Solihull Council will be approving their new local plan with the Arden Cross development. And with that and the HS2 proposals, clearly, you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, an objection in principle I don't think will be sustained by Solihull, and therefore I've drawn attention to 2 or 3 matters on page 503 or page 12 or 56. Which in fact should not be unusual, and may be referred to before, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, any comments?
Just clear up, you said one of the car parks will be built into the quarry, or will they backfill the quarry?
No, one of the car parks will be in the quarry, so that will be lower, but there'll still be 7 levels above normal ground level.
Sadly, not a deep.
It's not a deep quarry, no.
It needs to be deeper, is what you're saying.
Councillor Godfrey.
I just want to express a bit of frustration with the actual report. There doesn't seem to be very many specifics. It talks about the kind of biodiversity neutral, but nothing much goes to the details. And then there seems to be some factual errors, especially in the tables at the end. It was quite hard work getting through it all. And it seems to be quite repetitive, but then within it, you've got, it almost seems as if there's kind of cut and paste exercise going on. So in the tables at the end of the summary, also you've got, it is a really long way. This was part of my issue, is it doesn't seem to say a lot in the length that it actually is. But then there's some sections where it talks about a question about biodiversity, still going. But the comment doesn't refer to biodiversity, and then there's some questions about groundwater that do refer to growth, and there just seems to have been errors and mismatches in some of the information. Here we go. Finally, page 80, 81. So some of these comments in the tables at the bottom of these summaries seem to have just been cut and pasted in the wrong sections. It seems to imply that although at the moment I think it's bordering on a special scientific interest, it seems to be suggesting that the car parking is going to be a positive impact on biodiversity and landscaping. And I don't know whether that was just from the previous plan of the ground level parking, whether that's an improvement or not. And then on page 83, we've got a question about incorporating elements of designing out crime, and the answer refers to biodiversity, and engagement and consultations with private and local communities and private sectors. And again, it seems to have been cut and pasted into wrong boxes. I'm not sure if that's adequate, but there just seems to be mismatches of information throughout the report that don't always give us the clearest picture.
I'm saying, Councillor, I was shocked, genuinely surprised, shocked, that the London Healthy Urban Development Unit of the NHS had got the time to consult on car park in the middle of Wiltshire, and to find in the whole of that there was not one negative comment for help at a building of the car park. Quite what they know about Wiltshire in the London Healthy Urban Development Unit, I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was just some.
Can I just say that we have similar mismatches and wrong information on one of the other applications that got from Solihull for consultation. That's a little bit further north than the paperwork that they supplied to really was not up to the standard that they normally expect that we get from.
I think when it comes down to it, reading a 71-page report is an investment, and we would like that 71 pages of investment to be more worthwhile than possibly some of these things.
I couldn't agree more with you. Members, I think Mr. Brown has identified on page 583 the three principal areas that he's going to feed back to. Now, I think there are issues in here. You know, I have to say, when you look at the drawing on page 5A5 of what the car I actually have to say, would the members of Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council put up with having that in the middle of Solihull Town Centre? Is that a suitable design? I mean, okay, it's utilitarian and it's standard. But is that suitable for the edge of the green belt, looking straight forward into the green belt, accepting that the London, the NHS thinks it's perfectly fine for us? I think we really do need to emphasise that this is on the edge of the green belt. I accept this is a utilitarian building, but lots of other car parks have living walls on the side of them, have plants growing along the side to try and mask them. It's not simply a question of plant a few trees down the edge of the A452. I think they can do a substantially better job at bringing this into something which until I think quite recently, maybe even until up to the moment, is still in the green belt, and you know, okay, they'll take it out, but it's a bit cynical to plant that with no real detail on landscaping. What I'd ask us to do, members, is to agree with Mr. Brown on his 3 points, but that we have a request to Solihull that actually the board can meet with their team that's looking at this to positively discuss with them the impact on North Yorkshire, on its very close proximity to what will become the Greenbelt boundary, particularly in the impact of traffic from this development on North Yorkshire as a whole. We already have significant rat running issues throughout the whole of the borough. This isn't going to reduce them. So I think, you know, in some ways, Solihull are dealing with what they have to deal with. The roadway will be there. But I think, personally, I'd like to be assured a little bit more that they are mitigating the effects of this development on our borough in the best way that they can. And I'm just not convinced that it is at the moment. I think Mr. Brown has identified some issues, but, you know, perhaps with knobs on. No. Yes.
And I would say, Chair, based on what you said there, the NEC's a slab, all the buildings at the NEC are slabs. They're not as big as that in some countries, but over the years they've done a good job of hiding.
Only by building other buildings around them.
But you can't put planting in a rise in 5 minutes.
Unless it's a living wall. Members, are you all content with that? Any alternatives? Yeah. Those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much. You have what you need, Mr. Brown. Application number 5B is for the Old Saltinians, Compton Road, Water, Mr. Brown,
At
anything
the end of
else?
the slide is to show the location and the layout. As many of you can see, the access is up Coastal Road from down here. Clubhouse is here, quite a large clubhouse, and significant amount of car parking, and there will be overflow car parking along the other side of the road here. The application, as you can see, is to expand the uses to which the club can use the pictures. But as is emphasised in the report, those uses are all outdoor uses, they're not indoor uses, and therefore those outdoor uses are appropriate in the green belt, as members are aware, because planning permission was granted for this particular development on that basis. There are safeguards in there, Mr. Chairman, as you can see from the report. We have all the hours, opening hours condition is not to be varied beyond what it has been already. And particularly important is the events management programme, the events management plan, which has been agreed and will be agreed on an annual basis, so that residents will be notified of events, and there's a monitoring and review process involved in that same plan, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members? Councillor David?
When I first started reading this, I started writing comments such as we need to put conditions in about the car parking on the road, and we need to put limits on the amount of noise that is amplified outside the buildings. One of the problems these days is that if you are doing 6 from Full Street, that you have to yell at the people in to maintain, which is not a very efficient method, to be honest, but in my opinion. But reading through further into the report, I noted that that is already there. So I think we need to not strengthen, but emphasise some of those things for the future to make sure that they are fully understood and that the residents are subjected to noise and social conflict. But overall, we should be very thinking about support.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Brown, could you add an advisory note to the bottom to emphasise that point? I think, as Councillor David said, most of it is in the original consent, but just to draw the applicants.
I think it can also be doubled up in the events management plan, Mr. Chairman. That's the reason for that type of plan.
Thank you. Councillor Clues?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to compliment the officers and all the conditions that have been put in to protect the members. I just think anything the community, both and lobbying, I think we should support it and
Thank you. We should suggest they talk to the London, whatever it is, but the NHS. Councillor Humphreys.
This was one of the most successful clubs in the West Midlands, if not in the country. And one of its issues, major issues it had, was the income. When HS2 moved them, they didn't give them the money quick enough to actually generate what they wanted. The big gap, this club nearly disappeared. But it always generated the income by the extracurricular activities. And I think it's good that they should be able to do that. And I think that we should encourage it. There was always a school of the local community as well, and I would like to move that.
Thank you, members have been proposed and seconded for approval. I see those in favour. Any against? That's unanimous. We now move on to application 332 for the old mortuary in North Street, Haverston. Anything to add to the report, Mr. Brown?
I'd love to add to the report, Mr. Chairman. The planning history is there, and as members can see, the last planning application of the planning commission was for redevelopment, a two-storey development. This is a conversion of the existing, therefore far less impact. I can understand the county council's objection, but that has to be put in a planning context, as I've outlined in the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. My only question is, page 5C88, the draft Haverston Conservation Area Appraisal 2006. It's getting a bit long in the tooth to be a draft.
Well, yes, it is, Mr. Chairman. You'll be pleased to know that the new heritage officer started work on Tuesday. and Mrs. Barrett has got that on the list schedule of work to do.
Thank you very much. Members? Seconded by? Thank you very much. All those in favour? Any against? Against? Oh, sorry.
It's highly unusual that we go against the High Court.
Not unusual enough.
Precisely,
They've always been against us.
yeah, precisely. So it's a wonder.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor, I was really dazzled by your illumination. Could somebody try and find Councillor Jordan? No,
He'd be right out the front, just to check that the air's pure.
So, the next item, as I'm sure you're aware, is application for 269 for Drayton Court, the Green Park Zone. Perhaps you could talk slowly while the members return.
There's nothing to add, Mr. Chairman. We've had similar proposals elsewhere in the borough, and this just follows on from that particular approach.
Yeah, we're all happy. Proposed, seconded. Thank you very much. Trying at this rate, we'll have it all done by the time we come back. The next application is Walthorpe Cricket Club, Coleshill Road. Application number 113.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, just a site plan, as you can see there. The pavilion is in the far top left-hand corner of the cricket ground. Coleshill Road down here. The Digby Hotel is over here on the left, and they did have an access through here to the car park. The original access is down through here on Coleshill Road. Effectively, because that's now been closed off, and they want to have this, they improve the existing access down here onto Coleshill Road. That means it has to be hard surfaced, has to be widened, and particularly down here, there has to be better engineering to it in order to provide access and visibility. Through a series of subsequent amendments, we've now agreed with the Highway Authority the actual engineering requirements. In other words, what we've been agreed is a 5 metre wide access here, 5 metre wide gates, and a setback so that cars can pull in without having to queue on Coleshill Road, and also cars can queue when they're leaving without creating too much of a problem. One of the issues that we had, as you can see from Mr. Chairman, it's a Highway Authority issue again, is the Highway Authority was asking that these gates be closed until at the end of an over. At the end of an over, cars can go in, but then they had to be closed to prevent cars going up and down the road while play was in progress. That's not enforceable, as Councillor Humphreys says, Mr. Chairman. That's the reason why the recommendation for approval does not include such a condition.
Hello, members. Be grateful that County Council is considering safety in this one application. Any comments or proposals?
Yes.
Those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much. We've done the next two. We'll be pleased to hear. So we now move to agenda item appeal.
Nothing at all, Mr. Chairman, if members got any questions.
Members, are we have to note that?
I agree with it. So I'm glad it goes through. Got more maths than chip.
In that case, all those in favour of noting? Any against? Thank you very much. Members, agenda item number 7, I move the recommendation printed in your papers, unless you want to read it out. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Can you cease broadcasting?